Welcome to another episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders with NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you don't already follow me on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or wherever you may be watching this, please do. Really appreciate it. Today's topic is about kicking off the new year. It is now 2022, and one of the questions that I've gotten more frequently in the last few months is about whether or not this is going to sustain, whether or not the vinyl boom and the amount of interest and sales of vinyl records is going to sustain throughout this year and beyond. It's an interesting topic because over the last couple of years, things have exploded, obviously. And the question is that going to burst? Is the bubble going to burst? Well, I'm going to say it's not. I don't think it is anytime soon. And for me, that comes down to two basic factors. It's very simple, and those are supply and demand. So let's talk about supply first. In order for this bubble to burst, in order for the value of records to plummet, one of the things that would have to happen is the supply would have to increase substantially. Now, obviously, talking about new records for the most part here, because there's no increased supply of vintage records. The value of a used or a vintage LP that came out, 30, 50, years ago, that's on the secondary market for the most part. Even in record stores, you can consider those secondary markets because we're all reselling records, right, when it comes to vintage stuff. But as it pertains to new vinyl and supply, the supply is not going to increase anytime soon. And that is simply because the number of pressing plants that are currently working, at least in the United States, there's, I believe, 20 to 30 of them right now. And that's not going to increase anytime soon. Hopefully in the next few years, there will be new pressing plants that come on board, but it is not easy, it is not fast, and it is certainly not cheap to open a pressing plant. It takes a lot of upfront investment, and it takes a lot of knowledge that people simply don't have these days because nobody's been doing it. The vast majority of the pressing plants closed down in the early to mid 80s when cassettes and CDs became the most popular physical format. And therefore, there's a huge gap in time and a gap in knowledge from people, even like myself, who I would love to open a pressing plant. A, I don't have a huge, amount of money to do that. And B, I don't really know how to do that. I'm pretty knowledgeable about the industry. I could figure it out, I'm sure, but it's not going to be fast. It's not going to be cheap and, or easy, right? And so the reality of people saying, oh, well, why can't they just, open more plants and press more records? Well, it's just not that easy, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So I don't think that supply of new records, of new releases, whether it's from new albums coming out or reissues of older albums that are very in high demand, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Again, I hope over the next couple of years that will start to happen, because that will certainly be a great thing for the industry. Because right now, the supply cannot meet the demand on any level. In fact, I think it was, the number of records that are projected to be pressed this year in 2022 is not even half as far as the number that have actually been pre-ordered and that are projected to be pre-ordered based on the albums that are coming out and the reissues that are being repressed. So we are nowhere near close to meeting the demand in the vinyl industry right now. And I think that's a big reason why, for me, this bubble is not going to burst anytime soon. You're not going to see value plummet of limited edition releases, indie exclusives, record store day releases, things like that, simply because they're just not enough to go around, because the plants cannot keep up with the amount of demand, right? So supply, I think that's the easy one to talk about, because that just comes down to the manufacturing process. Not only the pressing plants, but also the plants that press, that create the lacquers or the stampers that actually get delivered to the plants to press the vinyl. It's all connected, and again, there's very few of those manufacturing plants worldwide, but especially here in the United States, right? So that's the first thing, is supply is not going up, not anytime soon. Now let's talk about demand. This one's a little trickier in my mind. The first thing I think of when I think of demand is, well, it's hard to get outside of my box, and I think a lot of longtime collectors, even if you've only been collecting for a few years, let's consider that long time, it's hard to step outside and imagine what it's like for a new collector, right? So if I'm, a 15-year-old kid right now, or even a 20 or 25-year-old kid right now, I have grown up with no physical media. Since day one, music was always in the cloud, it was always in the phone, it was coming out of YouTube, and that's all I ever knew. I didn't know CDs, didn't know cassettes, didn't grow up with any physical format. There was no device even in my home growing up, for the most part, that played music. So for a younger kid, for the younger generation, for them to know music, I'm not saying they don't know music, they just don't know the physicality of it. To walk into a Walmart or a Target or maybe even a record store, but especially those more common places, because that's where I think most of them are getting introduced to, vinyl, to walk in and see, a Taylor Swift record or a Michael Jackson record or a Led Zeppelin record, whatever it may be, to walk in and see this, 12 by 12 album cover and actually, for the first time ever, realize that, wait a second, that music that I've heard all these years, it's actually inside of this package. This is not a calendar, right? Like it legitimately comes out of this physical thing that I can touch. That's an amazing experience. No different than it was for kids, growing up in the 80s when, the cassette kind of phased out and the CD came. It was super exciting, right? Or no different when, I'm sure kids in the 60s, when they realized they could take a 45 and actually listen to a song off of this physical thing. That's happening again. The reality of physical media being a really magical thing it still holds true, right? And I think that has even been, that's even exponentially more magical and important these days, because everything we do, for the most part, is digital. Movies, music, maps, our phone, our communication, everything we do is digital. You can't touch it, you can't feel it other than holding the phone, right? And so the fact that kids can walk into a Walmart or a Target or a Barnes & Noble or a Best Buy and they see this nicely produced, nicely packaged vinyl record of that music that they love. I'm not saying kids these days don't have an appreciation for music, but the physical format of it they've never known until now, until the last couple years, when it's become more prevalent in those more common stores that they may walk in. Again, if a kid's going to wander into a record store and explore, God bless them, that's great. But I think for the most part, for the general, the vast majority of the younger generation, like, they're probably getting exposed to vinyl because it exists in these, big box situations, which is amazing, which is a great thing, right? And so all that being said, that's why I don't think the demand is going down, because that's happening every single day. It's happening right now. There are kids walking in and discovering that there is this, to them, new physical format of these artists they love. And some of them are taking a shot. Some of them are getting them as gifts, or you're getting a turntable as a gift and they're exploring it, and maybe it catches on for some. Certainly it will. Certainly some, it'll be a fad and they won't stick to it because it's just too easy to play the music on YouTube or whatever. But there's a certain percentage of the younger generation who will latch on, and we're seeing that. And that's why the demand is not going to be able, the supply is not going to be able to keep up with that demand. That's one of the reasons, right? And so if you imagine yourself as, in that scenario, discovering vinyl for the first time when you're at a Target, and then you find out, like, maybe you pick up a Beatles, greatest hits or something, or the Eagles or something like that, whatever, any of the top 100 releases that these stores typically carry. And then you realize, like, wait a second, this actually came out like 50 years ago. And then you go into a record store and you see a copy that came out in 1969 or 1975 or whatever. You're like, oh my gosh, you can get an original copy of this? Well, that's amazing. That's unbelievable to think that it still exists 50 years later and it came out originally on the release day when, you know, Abbey Road came out in '69, right? Like, that's an amazing thing. And so they'll pay a premium for that, because they're not dumb. They know that the original is what you want, just like anything, whether it's a, you know, an early pressing of a book, or an original print of a poster or a painting, or, you know, a vintage car. Like, you know, there is a level of coolness factor to that original type of thing versus the more modern day version of it, right? That's just kind of the way society works, and rightfully so. There's a coolness factor to that. So so it's not, to me, it's not only the new collector getting exposed to the hobby in general, but then being able to go a couple levels deeper when they actually do take the leap and go, well, you know, I see what Target has, I see what Walmart has. Like, let me actually go to my local record store if one exists, or let me shop online and see what exists there, and it opens up this huge can of worms. So to me, that's happening every day, undoubtedly, and that's one of the reasons why the demand has just exploded, and why there's no way the supply can keep up. And as far as 2022 is concerned, there's no way that's going to stop, in my opinion, because I think we're still at the beginning of that. I think it's still going up. Now, will value continue to increase on newer and vintage pressings? I think so. I think that's a big part of it. There's also a huge contingency of collectors who are more, you know, my generation, Gen X, if you will, who are getting back into this or rediscovering it. Like, I've seen a lot of that of people say, no, I had a collection years ago and I sold it off and went all digital, and now I'm getting back into it. And I think that a lot of that has to do, to me, like I was saying about everything being digitized. To me, I think physical things are coming back, and thank God they are, because everything in our life was sucked away from us and stuck into our phone in our pocket. I mentioned a bunch of them, but I didn't even mention like, you know, your camera, your calculator. I don't know if I mentioned your map. Like, everything you used to use, that you used to touch and feel, it's gone now. And so those things are coming back, and I think that's a great thing. And I think there's a lot of people who are realizing that, and who are realizing that, man, I really do love this music, and I actually want to own it, and I want to be able to touch it, and I want to put it on a shelf and know that I need to take care of it. Like, that is a real thing, and it shows an appreciation for it. And with appreciation comes value. I think that's a big part of it, is people actually value their records personally, monetarily or not. They see value in the fact that they actually have to, you know, have a place for them in their home to store them. They have to have a place to play them, you know, all those types of things. And so with all of that responsibility comes value, and therefore they're not going to let go of them real easy. So when they do end up, you know, wanting to sell some of their collection, or maybe they need to make some money, like, they're not going to just let it go for nothing, because they really value that personally, right? And the market has proven that, right? And so it's not only the new collectors, it's collectors who are kind of getting back into it. For collectors who have never stopped, well, that's kind of the most interesting thing, myself included, to be able to watch this wave, to watch this huge spike of interest, and to watch this huge demand, especially over the last couple of years, since, you know, so many people have been stuck at home, you know, because of COVID. I think that was really the fuel to the fire, because, don't get me wrong, the vinyl industry was doing great in, you know, 2017, 18, 19. It was really going up. Things were looking great. That's when I kind of got into the business, on the business side of things, and started NTX Vinyl. Because of that, I saw the opportunity, like, wow, this is really starting to catch on a little bit. But it was nowhere near the craziness that is going on from, you know, 2020 up until current day. And that's obviously, I think, at least to me, very obvious that, again, people were stuck at home. People were looking for new things to do. People were looking for new hobbies. There was just a number of factors that played into the vinyl boom of the last couple years. And again, I don't think it's going to stop. I really don't. You know, is it going to level off eventually? Well, yes, of course. But a lot of things have to happen in order for that to come to fruition, and the supply has got to catch up, the demand has got to level out, and I just don't see that happening in the very short term. A couple years from now, I can see it leveling off. But if you're one of those people like I said, who have, I've gotten plenty of questions people who have asked me, should I sell my collection right now because the value has gone up so much? Like, am I dumb to not just get out of this now before it crashes, before that bubble bursts? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think it's going to fluctuate a little bit, especially as it pertains to new releases and reissues where the value is just going up at a crazy rate right now because the pressing plants are so backed up. So I think some of those things will fluctuate. But as far as the hobby as a whole and your collection as a whole holding value over the next couple of years and for the long term, I don't see it decreasing anytime soon. And really at a certain point, I only see it leveling out because I personally do not believe there is going to be another physical format that will exist and take over vinyl. If you keep in mind, the only reason that vinyl went away in the first place is because there was another physical format to replace it. The cassette started to replace it, and then obviously the CD completely wiped it out, and then digital and streaming wiped out the CD. Now we're back to vinyl as a physical format. So you have streaming and digital, which is unbelievably convenient and amazing from that perspective. And then you have a physical format that is for the fanatic, for the collector, for the enthusiast. I don't think something's going to come along and wipe out either of those. I think technology is so far along in streaming, the streaming music, the capabilities there are simply amazing in regards to again, the convenience and the ease. And then you've got the quality and the appreciation for a physical format like vinyl, which is a beautiful thing. It's aesthetically, it is interesting, and it is large, and it's expansive, and it sounds great. It can sound great if you've got a decent system. Even a couple $100 system, it can sound really, really well. And so I just don't see vinyl getting wiped out again. I think that would be the only way for this thing to really burst. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be another physical format to come along, in my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but I just don't see the 8-track coming back and taking over records. I don't see the cassette coming back. Like, those are being made again, and that's cool. There's an appreciation for these formats, and CDs are still being made, of course. But as it pertains to growth this year and growth over the next couple years, I don't think you have to worry about the vinyl bubble bursting at all. In fact, I think, the more that you commit to it right now, it's only going to pay off long term in regards to it being an investment, not only monetarily, but obviously personally, because I think there's so much enjoyment to be had from owning records and listening and experience records and sharing records. And there's certainly a very strong community that is built around this, and I think that's a very great indicator that this thing isn't going anywhere anytime soon because of that community that has been built. Whether that's locally or online, wherever it may be, there are a lot of people like myself who love this hobby and who love the act of actually putting on a record and dropping a needle and sitting back and experiencing that album from start to finish as the artist intended, not cherry picking a song here or there. And so I think that mentality is starting to shift. And I think there's a lot of people who are seeing value in that and really getting appreciation out of it. So that's my prediction. I could be totally wrong, but I'd love to hear if you agree or disagree on the vinyl bubble, if you will, bursting this year or anytime in the near future. That's my spiel for the outlook of this thing moving forward. So thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. I'll be back with more videos soon here on Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders. Check out ntxvinyl.com for more information about my shop and what I do. Really appreciate you watching, and we'll talk with you next time.